Hello students, today I'll be completing a new topic on GS2 and probably an essay portion which is focused on digital divide in education. So today I'll be focusing on this and let's get the video started. First, let us focus on the current affairs. So the Supreme Court has recently warned that the digital divide has been caused by online classes will defeat the fundamental right of every poor child to study in mainstream school. So we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all spheres of life, and this has affected even the education sector, where students cannot go to schools, but they have been locked inside the houses and allowed to take online education, which was a very new thing for all the students. So today we'll be discussing how this affected the digital divide in education. So the current affairs is that the Supreme Court has lamented that the right of education has now become as a way of those people who can afford gadgets to education, not going to classes. And this situation has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As schools were increasingly turning to online education, the digital divide has been increased more and more. So first of all, let me explain what is digital divide. So we know that there are many divides, that is social divide, economic divide, where people are divided, where people are separated, who are rich and poor in terms of income. Social divide between the high caste and the low caste. So similarly, a new concept has come on out, that is the digital divide. The digital divide is that it is the division between the rich and the poor, especially in urban and rural areas, where the rich have a better access to education, having mobile phones and good network connectivity, as compared to those poor students who cannot even afford mobile phones and have poor internet connectivity, especially in villages. So this digital divide, if we explain, it may come for 2 marks. So we can explain that the digital divide is the gap between the demographic, that is the people, and the region that have access to modern information and communication, and those who don't have. And as I've told you, it exists between individuals who have access to modern information and technology and those who lack access. And this digital divide has been noticed mostly in developing countries like India and Bangladesh, etc., where there is a strict difference between the rich and the poor. And this digital divide exists between the developed and the developing countries, urban and the rural population, young and educated versus older and less educated individuals, and men and women. And in India, the biggest contributor of digital divide is between the urban and the rural, as I've always told you. Next, so how was the situation before the COVID-19 pandemic? How was the digital divide? So the digital divide was more or less the same, because India being a developing country, there is bound to be a difference between the rich and the poor. The rich and the poor. The COVID-19 pandemic has further accentuated or increased this problem. So before the COVID-19 pandemic, the students from the urban areas and rich families were learning the concept of science and with the help of modern technology and other e-learning platforms, while students in rural areas and poor families were lacking in basic infrastructure like toilets, proper classroom, and drinking water. And the situation was even worse in female children who cannot afford basic facilities like toilets, primary schools, especially in government schools, where girls have much need than boys, like menstruation cycles, etc. So this led to girls dropping out of schools, and some even had to walk 10 to 15 kilometers to avail basic education. So This was before the COVID-19 pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, there this digital divide was increased to a higher level, a more dangerous level. That is, the urban poor and the rich families where students teachers were acquainted with digital education, and due to comparatively higher income, families can easily afford digital devices for education, as well as they can afford various e-learning platforms. And the problem and the situation was worst in rural areas. That is, there were opposites where smartphones were earned by earning members, that is father or mother. Thus, students were finding very difficult to access to education and attending the schools. And in and as I've told you, they even with smartphones, even those having smartphones were facing network issues. So what were the effects or the consequences? So the effects first is that the poor will always be the one who will be the affected mostly. So the disadvantage bears the brunt. Those people belonging to the economically weaker section, those living below poverty line, and those who cannot even afford a proper education are have to have 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 to feel the effect of this digital divide, and they suffer the consequences of not having a pursued education, or worse still drop out because of lack of internet and computer. And they even run the danger of being drawn into child labor or child trafficking. So since they cannot attend school, the only way is that they can work in labors and even in child trafficking, especially for female students. Unfair competitive edge, that is, the rich have more advantage over the poor students even in competition. That is, the poor will remain void of crucial information presented online concerning academia, and thus they will always lack, and this may be summed by poor performance. And hence superior students who can edge over the internet have unfair competitive edge over the less privileged counterparts. That is, a rich student who have access to phone can have access to lots of information and um, crucial information, and this he can have advantage over a person who does not have any who does not have even a mobile phone to study. So this creates unfair competition between the poor and the rich students, disparity in learning, and thus the, the people in lower socioeconomic classes are disadvantaged and have to undergo long hours of comparison studies in order to meet the objectives of the course. And those the rich can easily access schooling methods online and work on their programs in a flash. So there's clearly a difference in learning between the rich and the poor. Decreased productivity among the poor. The those not having access to those resources will not have much productivity as compared to the rich. Next, so what can be the solution for this? The first solution is that we must increase the access to technology by bringing in development even in villages. The second is bringing digital inclusion even in poor families. Next, number three, increasing the income of the farmers by providing them benefits through which they can access the mobile phones, and they can provide education to the children. And number four is making education free of cost and allowing the s- al- uh, allowing the students to better access to good schools by through government initiatives. So these are some of the um, steps which can improve the digital divide. Next, so what are the constitutional provisions related to education? Where we already know that before the implementation of the 86 constitutional amendment in 2002, under article 45 and article 39F of the directive principle of state policy, it had a provision for state funded as well as equitable and accessible education. No, thus the 86 constitutional amendment was enacted, which provided right to education to 6 to 14 years of children, and it was included in the part 3 of the constitution, and it also inserted a new article, that is article 21A. And the right to education act 2009 was implemented as well. So what are the related initiatives? So the first initiative is the National Education Policy of 2020, which was released last year, which um, which brought improvements to the current education system, and this was updated after 1986. The digital infrastructure for knowledge sharing Diksha, it is a digital mission for providing education. Prime Minister e-Vidya, it is also a digital program for education. Swayam Prabha TV channel, providing free access to educational channels. And the last is Swayam portal, which is a portal for providing students with various degrees and workshops for education. So with this, the video on digital divide has come to an end. I hope you all like the video. So thank you all and have a great time.